Hello, this is Ron with Circadian Crop Sciences. Today we're going to talk about controlling spider mites without leaving pesticide residues on your crop. So to start with, let's talk about the life stages of spider mites. They start off with an egg. It's a small, circular, clear uh, little odd orb. And you can see it with a hand lens if you're looking with even a 10 powered hand lens. They're not that hard to really see. They're laid generally on the undersides of the leaves. They, when the mites get worse, they'll put a layer of spider mite webbing over the top of the eggs. It helps maintain a little bit higher humidity, which is more favorable to that egg. And it also protects them from pesticide sprays because the sprays end up uh, getting landing on the webbing rather than penetrating through the webbing. And so when you spray for spider mites, especially if you have webbing, you have to spray with enough force to break that webbing up. The spider mite eggs, the females, they lay up to 100 eggs in a lifetime, and their lifetime average is around 68 days. Below 48 degrees Fahrenheit, spider mite egg will hatch into a first instar nymph in about 19 days, while above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the egg hatches in 3 to 5 days. Eggs, they can overwinter in the egg stage, and they can overwinter as adults as well. The nymphs, that's what the eggs hatch into. They're considerably smaller than the adults. They go through 3 instars before molting into an adult. The first instar only has 3 legs, while all the other stages, including the adults, have 8 legs. At 59 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes 30 days to develop from an egg into an adult, while at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes 3 to 5 days for these nymphs to develop into adults. So you may have to be spraying very frequently if you want to keep those adults from laying more eggs. Adults are small. They're, of course, bigger than the eggs, but they're still small. I think they're about 1/60th of an inch, and they're visible with the naked eye. You can see them. You just can't make out a lot of detail. Um, the arrow, it points to their mouth part, called a chelicera. They're like little daggers that they can poke into things and suck out the juices. So if you've ever had a tick before, they have the same type of mouth part, only they embed that into your skin and suck out blood, whereas the spider mites embeds it into the plant tissue and it sucks out uh, the components of the cells. So, they're like little ticks for plants, not the most pleasant thing. Generally, the active ones are going to be kind of a translucent, golden, greenish yellow color with dark patches on them. This has 4 dark patches. So this is actually a 4-spotted spider mite. 2-spotted spider mites will just have 1 dark patch on either side. They would be your more common pest. Um, Dry conditions favor all spider mites. They feed more as the humidity lowers because that allows them to evaporate excess water that they excrete more efficiently. And also, when it's hot and dry out, their predators are stressed. And so they're not doing as good of a job controlling spider mites at this time. So that's when the biocontrol tends to break down if it's going to break down. Spider mite damage, you can imagine from feeding on the leaves, it takes the chlorophyll out of those leaves and you end up with these lighter patches. Generally, they're it's a speckled kind of look that's most typical. You can also get bronzing of the leaves and webbing on the leaves, which the webbing is most common, say where the petiole of the meets the leaf of the leaf meets the leaf blade, and that seems to be where you first see the webbing. Uh, Spider mites consume plant tissues and can greatly reduce yield and fruit quality, so they must be controlled. Predatory mites can be effective if started early, but often fail in hot and dry conditions. In fact, of the biological controls, I think the predatory mites are the most reliable, assuming you don't, it doesn't get too hot and dry, and assuming you don't have to spray for something else that's going to interrupt your predators. Spider mite populations readily evolve pesticide resistance. I have been a licensed applicator for over 35 years. I've sprayed pretty much every miticide that's ever been, and I've seen them all lose efficacy. So, spider mites, their populations seem to be, more than any other pest I've dealt with, able to develop pesticide resistance. Also, most pesticides do not affect the spider mite eggs, although there are a few, and those tend to be not registered for food crops or certain situations. The nymphs, they can develop into adults in as little as 3 days at 90 degrees Fahrenheit and higher. And below 59 degrees Fahrenheit, they're much more slowly. So we have several pesticides, or a couple of pesticides for spider mite control that leave no pesticide residues. They don't leave a residues because their active ingredients are basically foods. They're FDA approved food additives. Every ingredient in these products are approved by the FDA to go in your food. They're not considered to be pesticide residues. Circadian sunrise would be our most recommended for your main control of spider mites. And this is because it contains mint oil for one thing, and mint oil has been shown in many studies to control spider mites. Also, it affects the nervous system in 3 ways with the different terpenes inside of them. Of all the essential oils, the menthol that you have in mint oil and the menthone are the best for overstimulating these GABA receptors on the nerves of insects, which cause those nerves not to be able to fire. So the nerves basically, it inactivates those nerves. It also affects something called octopamine in insects by binding with it, so it can't do its job. And it also it affects insect cholinesterase, which causes other nerves to overfire. So they remain actually on when they should be turning off. The corn oil within this product, it smothers the mites, and it also, since we use raw corn oil, it's providing antioxidants and these polycosanyl waxes, one of which is called tricontanol. And these actually are good for plants and help the plant to deal with stresses in its environment. So when you apply this product, you're killing the pest without stunting your plant growth. Also, this is one of the few horticultural oils that you could be using sulfur, dusting sulfur or whatever, and you notice you have spider mites that the sulfur isn't controlling, and you can immediately spray with circadian sunrise without it burning the plants. The other main pesticide we have for spider mite control is Long Shadow. It contains 30% cinnamon oil. You're probably only going to have to spray this at 1/2 ounce per gallon to be effective. Cinnamon oil attacks the nervous system of insects similarly to the peppermint oil, but it is a different chemistry, and it does affect membranes more than the mint oil, which is probably why cinnamon oil does have a stronger tendency to burn plant foliage as well. So you do have to be a little more careful with this product. Test it out on a smaller sample size before treating the big group. Make sure your plants are well watered, and make sure you do this in the early morning and not at high noon, that sort of thing. To make sure you're not going to burn the plants at all. But it is very effective at killing spider mites. You don't want to get this product in your eye. Actually, you don't want to get any pesticide in your eye, but the cinnamon oil is very irritating to your eyes. It can be irritating to sensitive skin as well. So be a little more careful with this product. But it is a good product for rotating in with the circadian sunrise so that you can reduce the likelihood of the population of mites gaining resistance to the terpenes in the peppermint oil. Alphase is not a miticide. Okay, so this is a fungicide, but it's a fungicide that combines carrageenan with potassium sorbate. The carrageenan is a natural plant-based polymer that dries to an invisible film that's infused with the potassium sorbate. When you combine that polymer with another insecticide, such as the circadian sunrise, that film becomes infused with the essential oil terpenes that are like the menthol, the menthone, that are in circadian sunrise, and that then will dry to the surface of spider mites, and it increases the efficacy of those products that it's mixed with. Also, by itself, this product will not kill your beneficial insects and mites, but oftentimes you do need a fungicide that you can use in conjunction with using beneficial insects, and this is one that you can use. And it's been proven very effective at controlling like powdery mildew, downy mildew, that sort of thing. And even scientific studies that has shown that the potassium sorbate moves from the leaves down to the roots, where it can help protect against root pathogens. So part of every control program is to have good sanitation and exclusion if that's possible. In greenhouse and indoor operations, you do have more chance of excluding insects from the grow area. One thing you can do is have workers put on clean coveralls when they come to work, because these pests, they can get on your clothing when you're outside, and you inadvertently bring them into the grow facility. If you can have the workers work in one production unit each day, that way they're not moving from a production unit that's contaminated into an area that's not contaminated and then spreading pests. Also, it's better if you do have to move about from room to room. It's better if you go from the younger crops to the older crops than vice versa. And field producers, you're going to want to remove or disgunder the infected plant debris between crops, and during the growing season, take measures to reduce dust from blowing into the crops. And of course, start off with clean plants if you can. Now, biological control actually can work very well with spider mites. There's a number of biological control agents out there. You know, the big-eyed bugs, minute pirate bugs, um, and even ladybugs will feed on them to some degree. They're really not the most effective predators. The predatory mites are really much better at controlling spider mite populations. They all have trouble when conditions get hot and dry, though. And you know, one reason to incorporate these predatory mites is so you can go a long stretch without perhaps having to spray anything. And these predatory mites, um, they're going to put pressure, they're going to put pressure on the evolution of that population that isn't going to steer it towards pesticide resistance. So, you know, they can help keep these mite populations from developing resistance to pesticides. Here are some predatory mites to consider using. You note that some of them are more effective uh, in the warmer type of temperature range, while others, you know, they have to be, uh, you know, they like the Phytocelis persimilis, which is probably your best predator for use in a greenhouse, uh, is only going to be good to use when the temperature is between 54 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty easy to do in indoor and greenhouse production. The Amblyseius swirsky, that's probably going to be your best one for temperatures over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, the Amblyseius andersonii, you know, that'd be a good one to use right off the bat in the early spring, but it's going to have a tendency to go dormant in late summer. The Neoselius, Ceolus californicus, that one has a pretty wide temperature range, but it's, you know, it's really not that great for dealing with a population that's already out of control. You got to, with all of these actually, you really need to go in there right off the beginning before, while the populations are really low, and hope that those keep it down. If it doesn't keep it down, you better have another plan. Also, the Amblyseius swirsky, which is probably your best warm weather, you know, predatory mite. Uh, it's not good at controlling the hotspots. It doesn't even go into the webbing or where there might be honeydew from aphids or whatnot. It avoids those areas. Uh, Imperative with any pest control program is scouting. As far as spider mite goes, you're going to want to examine them every 2 or 3 weeks when the temperature is between 48 and 55. And when it's below that, you know, it's really not that important. Uh, Once the temperature warms up between 55 and 65, their rate of development is increasing. And, you know, you should look at them at least biweekly to see what the population's like. And once it's above 65, they can develop pretty rapidly. And at that point, I would recommend, or I do recommend, uh, examining your crop weekly. So when it's below 55, if you see little evidence of spider mites, this is generally going to be a time of the year where the crop is just starting off. You know, make sure you release these sachets of the predatory mites, and I'd start off with ones that can handle the cooler temperatures at that time of year and actually be effective. If you have several or more spider mites on multiple leaves on multiple plants throughout your operation, your grow, your farm, then you know, release the sachets if you haven't done so within the previous, you know, 6 weeks or so, and or you could just spray with circadian sunlight. If it's just in one little area on your crop, spray that little area with a buffer around it to and knock the population down. And then I would release more sachets after that. Note that these sprays do not kill the predatory mites within the sachets. If the predatory mite is on the surface of the leaf or stem and it gets hit by the miticidal spray, it's going to kill the predator. But once it dries, the spray has dried. The predatory mites can continue to crawl out of the sachets and walk about the leaves and look for prey to kill. When the temperature is between 55 Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to have to be more on your toes. You're going to have to be watching your crops more carefully, and if you're scouting, still reveals little to no evidence of spider mites. Good job. Your biological control, your predatory mites, they're doing their job, so that's great. At this point, Phytosciolus persimilis can be very effective. In fact, the Phytosciolus persimilis, you're going to want to use that between 55 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's probably going to be your most effective predator in that range. So in greenhouse situations, it's generally the go-to biological pest control for spider mites. But in field situations, it doesn't always, the conditions aren't right for it. But when it's 55 to 70 or 85, you're going to want to have Phytosciolus out there because it is the best. I would certainly consider adding that. The problem is if you do have to spray, they do not come in those sachets because they're a very generalist type of predator. They won't feed on other mites and on thrip larvae and pollen and stuff like that. So if you don't have spider mites, they're going to die out. And because you don't release them in those sachets, they are prone to being killed off by your sprays if you have to spray for anything else. But if your biological control is working and you don't think you're going to have to spray a miticide, then it would be good to do so, to put those out. If you're not comfortable with sticking with a biological control at this point, you can go with weekly to biweekly sprays of circadian sunrise and alternate with long shadow and perhaps throw another product in there. If you're seeing at this point several or more spider mites on multiple leaves and on multiple plants, you can release those sachets of beneficial mites or not, and you're going to need to spray. And alternate those sprays weekly to bi-weekly. If it's closer to 70 degrees, you're going to want to be weekly. If it's closer to 55 degrees, the bi-weekly is fine. And that should knock the population down to where maybe you're fine just releasing the sachets of beneficial insects, and they can get a population back under control. Do note that all phase, you can add that to the circadian sunrise, you can add that to the long shadow. It will increase the performance of those products. But if you are needing to control powdery mildew, because powdery mildew or downy mildew could be a problem in this temperature range, and you might need a fungicide, this would be a perfect fungicide for you to use to control plant pathogens without hurting your beneficials. Once the temperature gets above 70 degrees, the population can start to explode. And if you are not getting good control with your biological pest control program, you are going to have to spray something. if there's little to no evidence of spider mites, then your biocontrol is working, and as long as the temperature is still averaging below 85 degrees Fahrenheit, then you're fine releasing some Phytosciolus persimilis too, if you like, to go along with those other predators. You can also spray weekly to biweekly with circadian sunrise or long shadow. And that's just a little added level of insurance, and it's not going to kill off, your predators in the sachets. Are only going to help to beat back the mite population. But if there's little or no evidence, you don't need to. But this is part of your experience with how this pest uh, goes on your farm, and every farm is different. If you're seeing several or more spider mites on multiple leaves and on multiple plants, then you can release more sachets of Amblyscius swirsky. And we're at swirsky here because now this is a good warm temperature predator and would be a good one to introduce. And, put that out there every 3 to 4 weeks throughout, the warmer season of the year. You can still spray with circadian sunrise and long shadow in conjunction with putting these sachets out. In fact, I would uh, recommend at this point, especially if you've seen multiple spider mites on multiple leaves throughout your crop, you can't mess around, because especially if the temperature gets up to 80 or 90, you're dead. So you got to knock them down, and keep in mind those predators within the sachets are going to be safe. So once the spray is dried, they can come out and they can help beat back whatever you don't kill with the spray. Now, if you do see webbing, you need to deal with the webbing. Your spray needs to be strong enough to really, flip those leaves over and knock that webbing off. Because otherwise your spray is going to land on top of the webbing, and it's not going to get down onto the mites and do its job. Also, you can just go through a field with good pressure on your spray rig and just water, and just blast the webbing off, and then you can come back through afterwards with your standard miticide, and you're going to have much better results that way with getting contact with your miticide onto the mites. So we did mention rotating pesticides, and professionals do this to uh, reduce the likelihood of uh, insect populations and mite populations gaining resistance to the active ingredients of those pesticides. So, don't spray, say, circadian sunrise more than 3 or 4 times in a row without rotating to a different chemistry, such as long shadow. And there are other products out there that are miticides, but many of them may leave a residue that would kill your beneficials and be considered a pesticide residue on your crop. Uh, so, that's why we recommend the long shadow. Plant pathogens, you do have to worry more about than just spider mites affecting your crops or insects, and so you do have to be concerned about plant pathogens. You, as a grower or farmer, you have the experience to know which pathogens tend to affect your crop, and the timing of when you need to be spraying. We offer up our product All Phase. It has potassium sorbate as the active ingredient, and it's infused into the polymer carrageenan, and we've had it in field trials, and it's done an excellent job in controlling downy mildew and powdery mildew. Fields, other scientific publications show the potassium sorbate applied to the foliage moves down to the roots and protects against root pathogens. We have it in other field trials as well, but it seems to be very broad spectrum, and none of the ingredients constitute a pesticide residue per the EPA. And if you spray this directly on predatory insects and mites, it's not going to kill them. So it would be a good addition to your spray program. I do want to stress that farming is an art. Every farm is unique, and every guide is just a guide. Your experience and gut intuition is an art that is not an exact science, but perhaps the most important aspect of farming. So, farm your farm's beautiful. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at ron@ccsciences.com.